Ooh, you missed it. You missed the live show. I'm really sorry about that. But if you head over to photojoseph.com/LT, what episode was this? LT 1904, you will get to see today's episode. Unless, of course, you're watching this before that episode is released. So we release these on Saturday morning at 9 a.m., the Saturday following the live broadcast. You unfortunately have missed the live broadcast, which means you're possibly in that limbo period. You have to wait until after Saturday. But once they're released on Saturday, that's where it will be, photojoseph.com/LT1904. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week for the live show since it looks like you missed this one. Take care. Bye-bye.